Welcome back, welcome back. Fabulous to have you with us again. We never take it for granted. Welcome back to the Places We'll Go show with Richie and myself, with the lovely Nina Holdaway today. Welcome, Nina.
Thank you very much. Delighted to be here.
Well, it's fabulous to have you with us. Nina, obviously, I've known you for a wee while. And the thing I'd say at the outset is we always have a very human conversation. So I'm really looking forward to that today. To explain to everybody who Nina is, if you didn't know, Nina is MD at Accenture Song, has been at Accenture for about 6 years in the marketing, consumer, digital space, essentially helping brands to grow through relevance. Tremendously well respected in the industry, knows a lot of people, very generous with time and energy. And so fabulous to have you with us. The before that was that you were at Heinz for 5 years, Unilever for 4 years. So you've got a real pedigree, both client side and consulting side. And I've obviously worked with you as well around the Marketing Leader Program for the Marketing Society. And so it's just one of those many things that you do to help the industry more broadly. You're a native of Sweden. We've had a few Scandinavians on through the times, and it always brings a different perspective to the conversation. And I think that makes you very empathetic and considerate, but also razor sharp. So today, Nina, we're going to find out a little bit more about what makes you tick and what's going on in marketing from your perspective. So fabulous to have you on the show.
Thank you for having me.
Well, hey, no, it's an absolute pleasure, Nina. Let's get kicked right in. So what's been happening with Accenture in 2024?
So we have had, as ever, lots of change. We never tend to rest on our laurels. We've had in Song specifically, we have updated our operating model. We've had new leadership, and I'm actually right in the middle of working on that particular transformation, back to Mark's point around the human side of things, which is something I have always massively enjoyed, thinking about actually the impact on our people across the Song team and how we try and land that in a way so that people feel inspired and motivated and raring to go to do wonderful things for our clients. So that's how the year has started, and that's how I care to continue. And there's lots going on. 2024, I think, so far has felt like a more positive place personally than perhaps the year that we left behind. And last night we were together with a great group of CMOs, and we had exactly that conversation. I think regardless of where you sat last year, whether you were my side of the fence or whether you sat into a client organization, I think we all agree that 2023 was a pretty tough year for everybody. So far, so good. And it's already March.
We've got through the hard months. I always think if you get through January and February, then you're on the road. I'm going to go straight to that human thing. So it's very interesting to hear you say there, Nina, we're going through transformation, and then right out you say, and how do we keep people inspired and motivated? So the human thing. And I'd love to know a bit more about where that comes from. Is that just because you're a native of Sweden, or where does your empathetic human side come from?
So I think probably a few things, Mark. I think firstly, I am a great believer in, living by your values. And one of my values, probably my strongest value, the one that is always at the top of my mind, is bringing the best out of people, and also, personally trying to be at your best. And I think that's been something that personally has been with me since I was at school. So I've always, tried to push myself, tried to do that little bit more, but sort of never in isolation, because I've always liked the idea of actually what happens if we can all, push ourselves in a way that is right for us. So at school, what happened was I felt very frustrated when I saw potential in someone who at the time perhaps would rather go and play football and didn't really fancy it. And if I could at all, help, try and inspire, try and, show a different way, I loved to do that. Because I genuinely, truly believe, you hear a lot in business now, together we're better and stronger, and it's about collaboration. I think some people mean it and some people don't. I genuinely believe that we can only do brilliant things when we pull together. And I think it's essential to what I do. If I don't take responsibility for bringing the very best from Accenture Song to my clients, then I'm not doing a good job. So I think that's absolutely critical.
I love that mantra, and we certainly do. Stronger together is absolutely the way forward. And perhaps a sign of that, as you described, is what took place yesterday. Of course, you alluded to being with a bunch of CMOs. I'd love to get a little bit word on the street. What are people talking about? What are people feeling good about? And maybe what are people feeling anxious about?
So I think probably one word I'll use, and I think they feel good about it, and I think they feel anxious about it in equal measure. And I think the word is transformation. So it has been for some time, and I still think that's what's on people's minds. I don't think there was anybody in the room last night who, in one way, shape or form, either when they introduced themselves, they have transformation in the title, or when they talk about what they are currently doing at work, they're on a journey to transform something. And many aspects mentioned of what that means in terms of, cross-functional working and coming together, with a broader team, or managing the stakeholder landscapes, or, in many cases, finding the budget. And I think talking about what people sadly feel anxious about at the moment, I think it's budget, because with many of our client organizations, budget hasn't been and still isn't readily available for all the reasons that we know, because of the pressures to deliver, but equally, not necessarily demonstrate the growth that we need to keep the wheels spinning. And I think people are needing to do a job, but also needing to use their own ingenuity to find different ways forward. And we're finding the same. We're finding the same in our organisation, that we are having to, if the answer is no, we're just having to find different way of doing things to keep things moving. And that's probably what I would say is on people's minds at the moment. But I'd say a fair bit of optimism, actually, and I think I'm also seeing people are getting into it. So we've been on a change journey, and there has been so much fundamental change around us for such a long time now that I'm finding people are accepting it and moving forward with a can-do mentality, rather than perhaps either resisting it or shrinking into a corner and waiting for it to go away. I think everyone knows that this is not going to stop. This is going to carry on. And if anything, the pace is going to get quicker. So actually what I need to do personally and with my teams and at my company is, try and stay abreast of it, try and work out in real time, what does that mean for us? And how can we actually upskill to get better? And that's a huge theme for us internally at the moment. Everybody up and down the ranks in Accenture talk about upskilling, and everybody overtly are sharing what they are working on, what they're learning about, where they are finding the time to do it, which is often the thing that is the biggest struggle. And I think that's wonderful, because it gives, I think, for me, being collectively minded, it creates a bit of a level playing field. So when the teams are hearing that our CEOs are spending time in their spare time or during their working week learning a bit about, Gen AI, which is obviously top of mind for a lot of people at the moment, or something else, I think is a really good, positive place to be.
Can I just add to that a second? Because you clearly have Accenture has made a major announcement just in the last couple of days around Udacity. And I guess it's very much testament to that learning culture that you're both trying to create, and also play you obviously see a major role for Accenture in that industry, perhaps, or helping your clients and upskill themselves. So maybe that's absolutely a core theme that's coming through both internally, perhaps, and externally as well.
Yeah, and I think something I'd say we've always been good at, which we talk quite a lot about internally, is doing it to ourselves first. So you will often find that by the time things become more commonplace for us to do as a project with clients, there will be a backstory of Accenture having done the same to ourselves, a couple of years prior to that. And you can certainly see that in the tools that we are using, in the way we're integrating already generative AI into some of our processes, and things that we're already starting to have at our fingertips, because we have to be ahead of the game. And if we're not experimenting, trying things, learning and failing, then we're not able to have an informed point of view that we're then, implementing to our clients. So, no, we're super excited about our most recent acquisition. And I think you're right. I think this is about us and our clients and walking the talk. And that's exactly what I'm seeing internally at the moment. And I think if we look at the marketing industry as a whole, as we've all been part of for a long while, isn't it much more exciting where we don't have young talent in the middle of their careers, the talent at the other end, experienced talent, but we're all in it together. And that's genuinely, I think, the way it feels now. Everybody wants to learn from each other. And it doesn't, hierarchy has never mattered to me anyway, but it's not about that. It's about who you are as a human, what your ambition is, and what you're going after and how you're doing it. And I think we've got an enormous amount to learn from each other. And that's when I think we're at our best, when we source from different places, when we seek diverse perspectives, when we've been inclusive and, bringing people into the fold to be able to do incredible things. It's exciting.
Wow. Where do I go now? We could talk about talent. We could talk about hierarchy. We could talk about inclusivity. But actually, I'm struck that I've just joined a dot now, which is obviously AWS was created by Amazon to fix their own problems, and that is true of, I think, of what you've just said there, which is you've got your own transformation agenda, you've got your own talent agenda, you've got your own Gen AI agenda, and figuring out for yourselves is part and parcel of how you go to market with those things. But I'm actually going to go rewind to the dinner. So I was fortunate enough to be at this dinner. Nina and I have only actually been apart since this dinner for about 8 hours. Very privileged to be at that dinner, and it was fascinating. And there was a replay of some life trends. And one that really struck me was, where's the love? And this was about the fact that many organizations have really lost the plot from a customer experience, customer service point of view, just because of the squeeze of COVID. And there was the example of the shrinking Mars bar, or the shrinking chocolate bar, BMW charging a subscription for having heated seats, and basically kind of conning customers because of margin compression. And of course, I was always of the opinion that marketing is the represents the customer, brings the outside in, brings the future forward, represents the customer. And so tell everyone a little bit more about what you're seeing about this squeeze on customer excellence.
Yeah, so I would say there are a couple of things going on. I think, and when there were a couple of themes yesterday. You're right, Mark. One of the themes was, so someone used a story to say, well, actually, I'm subscribing to something, and I had an upfront conversation to say we got under cost pressure, we're going to have to, put the prices up, and it was okay, well, at least, as a consumer, as a customer, I could evaluate whether I wanted to stay with this brand or whether I wanted to depart and go somewhere else or, spend my money elsewhere. But what we're seeing, of course, around us is, unfortunately, a lot of brands who are trying to do it on the quiet and do it on the cheap. And I think there was an example there of, a crisp bag, and someone having opened their crisp bags, realizing that there were only, 5 left now. And that's not going to, fulfill the need that my crisp bag did at lunchtime, perhaps in the past. So, and I think we're seeing that, whether it's the services sector or whether it's products related, I think we're seeing that everywhere. But there was another theme that is interesting, but I also think hugely takes away from the customer experience, which is, as we've been trying to work in the new world with technology, I guess, the creativity becoming stifled because we are having to work in certain formats. So there is a notion now amongst consumers that all the apps look the same. So it doesn't matter whether I go and communicate with my insurance company, or whether I'm doing my banking, or whether I'm trying to use a sports app, because it all looks and feels the same. And actually our brands being able to be distinctive nowadays, and are they pushing themselves? Have they found the right ways to stand out? Or is it just a sea of sameness? And we had a lot of that in the trends report that we have done, that only launched in January. So I think there are a couple of big issues that are really challenging around customer experience at the moment. And there is a cry out for creative, I think. I think everyone is looking to see novel things, exciting things, things that, inspire them in the way we always have wanted to do. But that's gone away a little bit. And I think people are saying, well, there is so much between me and the experience I'm actually having. And, or algorithms are preventing me from seeing X, Y, and Z. And I think it's going to become a huge problem. And I mean, back, Mark, to the first point you raised, those brands and companies that are out there to almost, for want of a better word, con their customers, I think are going to find it tough because times will get better. It won't carry on like this, and there will be a time when they are able to invest again. But that's, I think, going to be challenging.
I tell you what, Nina, if I find out what that brand of that crisp packet was, I'm going to stop eating them. That was it. You know what it is. But you're absolutely right. That there's a real need to get down to understanding both customer expectations and really understanding the utility of a product and what actually is the requirement from a customer perspective. I find it interesting, this whole conversation in and around creativity, and I suspect that generative AI plays a big role in the future of creative. And of course, we've seen some mega examples of how Gen AI is able to create the next level of creative where people perhaps thought that it wouldn't. So we can see there's being a big leap of disruption taking place in that area. But at the same time, I suspect what it's doing is this whole role of automation is almost sucking out the human creativity in some guises, because we're looking for a streamlined approach over perhaps sort of a more traditional creative way of doing things. So it is a really interesting space, and I think it's quite a dichotomy really between the two and how we toss up both of them as we evolve in the space. I want to pick up on a slightly different thing that you said a bit earlier, and that was in a constrained environment in which we live, and you described that a lot of individuals around that table yesterday spoke to. It was all in and around using your own ingenuity to find a new way forward, and I think that's really fascinating. Quite frankly, it's about being empowered and feeling empowered to do things. So perhaps in your own career, what ways have you used ingenuity to find new ways forward for yourself and the organization you work?
Yeah, that's a really good meaty question. I can think of one time when we had it's a consumer led story. So when I was working many years ago, when I was working for Unilever, I was in what we very sexy name for it. We called it yellow fats. I don't think any human being would ever refer to it as yellow fats, but they were big lumps of margarine. And of course, the trend at the time was, how can we make cooking quicker, easier, etc. Some markets were already using a lot of oil, others were using butter or margarine. But the trend was going towards actually making the margarine liquid so that those markets that liked that product and that experience when they were cooking could still use it, but use it a bit more easily than getting, a knife out. And, it can be a bit messy, can't it, when you've got a big lump of fat in the cupboard. So I was on a project, a big European project. I was still in Sweden at the time, and it was called Project Gold. And the idea was that we were going to look at, how do we, very much driven by consumer insight. And we had all the, backup across all the markets. How do we start now shifting the market? Because it's been like this for decades, but actually what the consumer is telling us they want a more convenient and better experience when they're using our product. So we went on a big mission to persuade Unilever in Europe. This was a European project. We only had one big problem, and that big problem was that the margins weren't as good. as is, often the case with innovation, you don't necessarily always come up with innovation that is going to do what, the product that you have had perhaps on the market has been doing. And I then had to use all my persuasive. So I was looking after the Nordics at the time, and had to go into bat in my market to find a way to build the business case and maybe, that was one of the times when having a passion, not just for perhaps your own function of marketing, but being really genuinely interested in all of the other functions. I had already built up good relationships into sales. I already had strong relationships into finance. So I didn't start from scratch or from nothing. I had a really good, strong network around me. And then starting to think about actually how do you influence that network so that you have got the right people around you lined up to support that, first of all, launch, and then later on thinking about, it's not just about the launch, it's about how do we really push, because this is what the consumer wants. And then, of course, over time, look at ways of how can we make this line, more profitable, et cetera, which we did. So that was a massive success story, not just in my market, but I think across Europe. And I have to say, sad as I am, when I go back home to Sweden, the first thing I do when I go to the supermarket and buy, we have a holiday, I'm lucky enough to have a holiday home in Sweden, and we obviously go and do the shopping. First we do when we arrive, I always get a bottle of that. It's still on the shelf, and I always feel very proud.
There you go. Wonderful.
Project Gold in yellow fats. Who knew? So Nina, you cut your teeth in yellow fats. I cut my teeth in pet food at Mars, and I still go down the pet aisle, even though sadly our dog passed away about 18 months ago. We've yet to go again. Isn't it funny how we go back to our origin? But your emphasis around relationships and network to making things happen, influence is a great learning, or a great point for everybody. I'm just going to go back one step further, which is why marketing? How did it all get started? Was it your destiny? How did it all get started?
That's a really good question. It wasn't my destiny at all, actually. I did strategy and org at uni. So I did a business degree. I always loved school, and I loved university equally much. Did 4 years. Did a business degree with business administration, economics, and languages. So I did both English and German, which was about give or take a year out of the 4. Worked abroad, lived abroad during my sort of spare time in the summers, as well as during term time a couple of times. So ended up going to Switzerland, ended up going to Germany, moved around quite a lot already when I did my degree. But what I hadn't, of course, anticipated was that it was going to be marketing, not at all. So I was very torn, and it's actually quite funny that I'm now at Accenture, because the choice when I had done my degree was either Unilever or BCG. And I was very torn. Was I going to go into client industry, or did I want to do consultancy? And I think for me at the time, it was a question of actually learning to do it on the inside of an organization first, so that you know how it works, and then perhaps later on in life, which is what I ended up doing. But that was the thinking process, rather than going the other way. I think there is no right or wrong. That was just what I decided was the right thing for me. So I started on Unilever's grad scheme, and at the time it was built up by 3 times 6 months. So we had, the idea was that you were going to go from one function to another to get a flavor for, what the company does and how it works and all of that. And I'll now come to the but and how marketing. So I ended up in marketing. That was my first assignment, was massively inspired by marketing and what we were doing in marketing, by my colleagues who did an amazing job of taking me under the wing and bringing me to just about everything. Probably just, starstruck on a couple of occasions, meeting just amazing creatives that I never thought I'd sort of get to meet. And we extended my period because it was working for us all, and rather than sort of doing just the 6 months and then moving across to another function, I was asked, would I stay on for a little bit longer because that was good business reason. And then what happened, somebody left the team. One of our brand managers left the team when I had done about 10 months of my grad scheme. And I was in love with marketing, had been since day one. So I said, please, can I actually finish my grad scheme now and join in my first role as a brand manager? And I could. The answer was yes. And that's where the Yellow Fat story started. So that's how I got into marketing. And I have to say, the one thing I've never done is look back. I think my career has gone relatively early on, went in quite a general management type direction, which I actually stopped about 10 years in. So Unilever was all about marketing. Heinz, now Kraft Heinz, as you probably know, is a much more commercially orientated environment. So I certainly upped my game, I think, commercially while I was with Heinz. But I lost the marketing bit a little bit, and that's why after I left Heinz, I then came to brand learning and later on Accenture, with that view to come back to marketing. So no, it's an interesting story. If someone had asked me before I finished my degree, was I going to go and do marketing, I probably wouldn't have said yes. I don't think. I had a different idea working with strategy and organization, and funnily enough, some of the client work I now do is up model related and org related. So I've sort of marked back to the point about coming full circle. I'll probably come full circle a little bit as well later on in my career.
But Nina, we are all so much better off for having you fallen in love with our industry and then decided to come back and return to it at every twist and turn that you've said that you've had. A fascinating story. It really is. And like you said, like many, marketing wasn't in your destiny, but yet, as you say, you've got a real passion for this space. And absolutely at the heart of it, I'm sure, is that creative zest that we all get when we sit in marketing rooms.
I think the creativity, and the other thing for me that's always appealed about marketing is if you genuinely love humans and you are curious about human beings, you enjoy being around and being with humans, then I think when you do good work in marketing is when you really get under the skin, of course. First, it's not something I need to sort of go and do as a project, if you like. Because it's just for me, it's more of a way of being. And that's probably an important part of why emotionally I just connected with marketing and hit it off and have continued for many years.
Fascinating there. And I love that thought around being around humans. And I'm going to pick up on that just a little bit here, because I think Accenture Song does an absolute brilliant job of tapping in to cultural relevance of what the person on the street is genuinely thinking and feeling at this moment in time. And I would love to hear, one, how you get a sense and how you get to that point. But two, what do you think are consumers feeling and thinking at this moment in time?
So I think, and thank you, and I agree with you. I do think one of the many things that we focus on a lot on and do very well is stay very close to sentiment at any point in time. And you may be familiar with the trends work that we do and have done for many years. So this year, the Accenture Song trends, life trends, are in their 17th year, I believe. And that's a process, that's an annual, yes, they launch once a year, but actually the work goes on throughout the year. So last night, the dinner that Mark referred to earlier, when we had our CMO community together, I had two brilliant colleagues by my side, Mark Curtis and Katie Burke, who lead that team. And that team of thousands of designers involved that we go out and survey, and we do an enormous amount of work internally as well. And it's a daily process. So there is a core team on a daily basis that meets to discuss what's the latest, what have they picked up in the last 24 hours, and that continuously feeds into what then becomes the annual trends. And obviously, you have to launched them at a point in time, but the work doesn't stop when we launch them. Of course, there is a period of time of then going out and engaging and sharing some of that. But I think it's essential to the work that we do, because if we don't know what's down the line, then we're not going to be in a good place to advise clients to say, here is where you are, here is where things are going, therefore here is what the journey must look like. So I think that's the reason. It started actually. You probably know that Accenture Song has grown a lot through acquisition, and this was brought in by Fjord, one of our design agencies that have been with the business now for well over 10 years, and it's become an Accenture-wide thing. And back to your second question in terms of where consumers are at right now, I think, it doesn't matter which market you go to. I think things are really tough for people out there. I think I have never seen as many people out of jobs in our industry, in marketing. I've never had as many conversations as I do now with, be it CMOs or people earlier on in their career about, looking for their next move, because companies have now for a good few years been cutting back and letting people go. And of course, it's not as easy as, I've just lost my job. This has an immediate impact on your living, on your family, on what you're able to do. And it hits people, I think, at the time when everything else is, all the costs are going up. So I think it's been tough for some time. I think it's going to carry on being tough for some time. If you are a brand, or now is the time to invest a little and to find ways of showing that you're human, showing that you are kind. I'm not saying to, you need to give things away. I understand that everyone is, in business. But if there are ways that you can show compassion and empathy and an opportunity to build relationship, I would say that opportunity is now, because things will come around. They always have, when we look back over the decades, that this is not the first time we're here. And I think that's when those are going to come out as winners who've invested a little bit of extra time to look after people and care for people. And those that have been going down the route of shrinking the crisp packages, I hope and think won't see the same success.
Always back to the crisps. But again, that loop back to humanity, which I said I was sure would be a theme. On the theme of really tough, we've got very similar age kids, and as young people think about plotting a career, obviously it's getting harder and harder. This is a well-trailed subject. What's your advice for people thinking about careers in marketing? How can they set themselves up well?
So this is a very current topic in my own house, with three girls starting out with their careers and making choices and thinking about and we had this conversation again last night about how do you actually set yourself up for success when you don't even know what the skills are that you're going to need for the future. So the discussion we've had at home and that I'm having at work is I think education in itself is always going to be valuable, and learning is absolutely essential. So I think approaching your future with a view that it's going to be about lifelong learning. It's not going to be about doing a university degree and then I'm done and then I'm going to be working. This is going to be much more of a marathon, I think, of us learning to constantly reinvent ourselves. And you're seeing that around you all the time. People who are either learning more about what they're already doing or learning about something else. I think that's absolutely key. I'm trying to say to my daughters that, learn not just about your topic. I've got my middle one has just started she's in year 2 doing an economics degree. Learn about people around you and learn about what they are taking out when you're learning, and throw yourself into the group work, that the task that they are setting you, and think about your learning not just as what mark did I get on X exam, but think about actually what's the experience I'm having and what am I learning from that experience, and how do I start networking? That's something we didn't have LinkedIn when I started out. That's only become a thing later on in life. But with the opportunities I think we have got with modern technology, make that your thing from the start. To, as you meet interesting people, make sure they're part of your network. As you learn interesting things, go out and talk about it. Because I think you learn by how people are responding and what they're asking you, what they are then sharing in return. And that's one of the things I love about our CMO community. It's a genuine peer group, and it's about learning about those things that you would never go and read about anywhere because they're not being widely shared, but they are the anecdotes and stories that people are sharing with you. The other thing I'm advising people internally is, don't just come into a role and assume that you have to be in a certain way. Just come into that role and make the most of the role, and think about, what are the people around you that you're going to need to succeed, and where can you see yourself adding value, even if that sits in a slightly different place, might be slightly adjacent to the role that you're doing. Paint yourself into that and think about how you can bring your best every day. So those are some of the things. And follow your passion, I think, is never going to go away. Do something you care about and that you're passionate about and that you're in love with, because if you do, you're never gonna work a day. And that's what I've loved about my career. It's never felt like work. It's always felt like something I am doing because I'm enjoying it. And then you get energy from it, and then you can use that energy in your personal life, and then vice versa, having a good family life or a good structure around you, whatever that may be. If you get energy from that, you can take that back into the workplace. So that's another thing for me. Think about how you pace yourself and how you show up every day, even if you've had, as Mark said at the beginning of the conversation, a slightly short life. How do you show up feeling excited about what you're doing and bringing that, passion and excitement to others? Because I think then it's easier to give if you're in a strong and in a good place yourself. And I think work and what you do professionally is absolutely critical to that.
Oh, Nina, wow, that's a lovely way to end our segment here. Showing up excited every day, despite, as you say, short sleep sometimes, I think is super important. And finding what gets you out of bed and gets you excited to go into that office, either virtually or in person. I also love the thought that you describe in and around the wider role of learning, not just being, paraphrasing, in and around the technical skills that you develop, but far more around the softer skills that you can earn and learn from groups of people, linking into the networks, and eyes and ears open to those opportunities to one, open doors, but two, clearly to learn from people, learn what they are thinking and feeling, and therefore through osmosis largely, which makes that process all the more rich. So some really, really super pieces of advice there. And of course, as an education buff myself, love the end sentiment around education, learning, and lifelong learning too being at the core strand, both of what is at the absolutely as your personal sort of vision and mission, but also that of an organization that you work with. I think that's fabulous to think that that's one of the core pieces of thinking that you're doing as an organization today, both for yourselves as well as who you then serve in your client base. I think that's a wonderful sort of sentiment. And of course, in a changing landscape, as we've described, the role of learning and education is going to play a pivotal one in us being able to come up with solutions to, as you described, transformations that we are currently going through. I'm going to try and sum up just some of these key themes here, just for us here, Nina, today. And there's been so many wonderful nuggets that you talked to. And of course, clearly coming back to crisps and communities, certainly the ones that you spent last night, are all the more important. Two important lessons there. One's about people and humanization and being in it together. I think that's a key theme that we spoke of. And that CMO community that you described really feels like it's a genuine place for people to come together. And I urge everybody to find their tribe, find out what really helps them to bring people together. But not doing so without, recognizing the world of constraints, which of course is in our analogy of crisps, where you find that ultimately, if you're too constrained, or you're too not thinking in a customer-centric way, you ultimately, hopefully, will ultimately be for the deterioration of what you're doing. So I think, having humanized customers at the center of what you're doing is going to be pivotal here. You come across to me as a very optimistic person, and one that is, one who really believes in the power of helping each other and fostering, dare I say it, friends before you need them in that sense, because it clearly is, the influence that you have on others and them they have on you, which forms strong bonds, which enable you to get things done. And clearly that yellow fat example is just testament to that, even early on in your career. So something obviously been innate in you to be able to do that. I love the thought. One, should I caveat this with your open-mindedness about it, but the thought about learning to do it from the inside first. There's no right way around to achieve it, but it's what you felt at the time. And I think there is certainly that power in your conviction, which I think has held you in really good stead. I didn't touch on it, but it really felt like you've navigated your career well, and you've been able to spot opportunity when the time has come. And I think that's really intriguing. And certainly the brand manager, when you jumped in from the grad scheme to be a brand manager, to then elevate and to work on some wonderful work at Unilever, is just testament to that thought process. And then finally, I think there's a complete recognition here that the environment in which we work is challenging. And that happens at a personal level with us in terms of roles and jobs, particularly in marketing at the moment. We are in a difficult spot. But yet, overlaid with that, a sense that tides will change, things will come around, and then therefore investing in ourselves, investing in our networks, are really going to be what's going to set us apart in the future. So I hope I've done you justice there, Nina, with just some of the key themes that we've pulled out here. But it's been a fascinating and wonderful conversation. So I thank you for that. And I'm sure our community too will really appreciate it.
Thank you so much. I have thoroughly enjoyed talking to the two of you this morning. You have absolutely filled me with energy for the day. So thank you for starting your day with me. Absolute pleasure.
Thank you, Nina.